How do I make $20,000 selling my art as an architecture designer, working less than 2 hours a week? I'm going to show you my 5 sources of income and how much I've made from them. And if you are interested in hearing my full story of how I got started, how I make my art, to running an online business, that's all included in here. If you stay all the way to the end, I'm going to give you 7 pieces of advice if you are interested to monetize your hobby or passion as an architect or interior designer. I believe if there's one thing that you're very good at, you can find a way to make some money from it online. And just imagine how your life will be different with just 1,000 to 2,000 more disposable income per month, which was my perspective when I started in San Francisco. Since 2018, I've been selling my travel drawings as prints on Etsy, which has evolved to include income from private commissions, consignment deals, wholesales, and art licensing. So what are my 5 sources of income? Number 1 is the sales from Etsy, which is how I got started in the first place. And I'm actually gonna use 2021 as the year just to show you how much revenue it has brought in just from selling my art on this platform. And you can see here, it has generated a total of $17,319 from January to December. And this graph is very indicative of what your sales might look like if you have an online store. So the last 2 months and the first month of the year tends to be the highest because those are the holiday seasons, and that's where people are spending most money for gifts. So these are predictable in the past couple of years since I've opened my store. And the rest of the year, it's going to hover to about the same. Keep in mind, this is the total revenue. It does not include the cost of goods. So however much you spend on paper, printing, and packaging, all that is included in here. This is the store that I've built up in the past 4 years. Currently, it's gotten a lot of good reviews, gotten a good amount of sales, and it's really running itself. The next one is fairly easy. It's private commissions. And this, actually, funny enough, all came from my Etsy inquiries. These are customers who wanted something a little bit more custom, whether it's a home that they lived in or a city that I don't currently have on Etsy. I've also done it for people and dogs, which are a little bit outside of the things that I typically draw, which are landscape and architecture. I did a number of these in a year. You can charge however much you think your time is worth. So for me, a private commission for something that's typical in my usual architectural print size, I'll charge a couple $100. So that's maybe like $200 to $300 for a drawing that I would produce in less than 5 hours. Very rarely, if you've done a private commission with their consent, you can use the same art and sell it as a listing on Etsy as well. So you can reuse that custom drawing for your own work. Number 3 revenue stream is consignments. And consignments is really about working with a local store. You're not making money up front. What you're doing is you're kind of lending them your drawings, your prints, or your products so that they can sell it in their store. When they make a sale, that's when you get a monthly paycheck from the store. My prints are consigned at 50%. So what that means is I get 50% of the sale from the store, and based on my research and understanding, that's fairly typical. You might think 50% is a lot of money to be given to somebody else, but think about it in terms of the store who is doing the management of the day-to-day. They're renting out the physical space, and there's a lot of overhead for them. So 50% is actually fairly reasonable. These are the stores that I literally, went on my weekends when I lived in San Francisco. I had planned my routes of different stores that I thought may be a good fit to carry my prints. So now I have a couple of very consistent customers who regularly purchase my prints 3 to 4 times a year. Whenever they run out, they'll send me a request and I can fulfill that order. And then what I do is just basically package it up, put it into a USPS and ship it to them. There is a little bit of risk because you are putting your products that you spend money on and you are lending it to somebody else. If they went out of business or if they decided to not pay you, that is a risk to yourself. So I wanted to make sure you understand what consignment is, and it goes much further than that, but that is the basic idea. Now, number 4 is wholesale. And wholesale is very similar to consignment in a way where you're only getting 50% of your retail price. So if you're selling something for $20, wholesale is generally 50% of what you're selling online. And the advantage of this is you're using somebody else's store to sell your thing. The benefit of doing the wholesale is you are getting the money at first. So you are getting paid from a customer who is placing an order from you, and you are fulfilling that order. I much prefer doing wholesale and consignments, but some stores, they don't have the financial capacity or backing to purchase ahead of time. So for a smaller store, consignment will work better in their favor. So I give them the choice of doing wholesale or consignments. And some other stores will rather do wholesale because it's easier for them to manage. They don't need to keep track of all the artists that they're consigning with. So if they're purchasing ahead of time and they know these prints are gonna sell, it's just a matter of time, it is easier for them to buy in bulk. And when they run out, they'll just contact you to place another order. And the last revenue source is art licensing. And this is kind of new to me. I actually had to do a lot of research on that this year. I've gotten a couple of requests actually from Etsy as well, from companies who work with bigger establishments like hotels or restaurants that want quantity work from an artist. So they reach out to individual or independent artists like myself. They must have saw my listing on Etsy. That's where they've seen my work, they've contacted me, they asked me whether I'd be interested in licensing individual work or a series of work to be produced at a mass quantity. So for me, this year, it was a new hotel in San Francisco that needed a piece of print to be displayed in every room. So I can't remember the exact number. It was in the ballpark of 400 to 500 hotel rooms that needed the art. So imagine that quantity times the number of art in that room and then multiply it by a cost of licensing. That suddenly could be very profitable and lucrative. And you don't even need to ship your physical prints, but the cost for licensing a single print will be a lot lower than how much you expect to sell your print if you were to sell it as a retail price. Let's give you an example. If I were selling a print for $20, that would be the cost of the print on Etsy. And of course, on wholesale and consignment, the cost of the print would be $10. With art licensing, you may expect maybe just $2 to $3 per license for somebody else to print your art for another client. But in the grand scheme of things, if a couple hundred of them is being printed, you can do the math and imagine that is actually pretty good income. And you're not doing anything, you're just providing the digital format of the art to somebody else. And you'll sign an agreement, and you have to believe that they are not going to print more than what is indicated in the contract. And there's really no way for me to monitor that. So I'm gonna do that in good faith and believe the person that I'm working with isn't going to abuse this contract that we've set out in the beginning. If the company that you're working with is really nice and they will, send pictures of your art being displayed in the room. And for me, that is really gratifying to know that, my artwork is being shared and being respected by the patrons or the customer in the hotel. So that was a very cool experience for me this year. You might be wondering, how much money has it made for me so far? And I'm just gonna do it with the 2021 as the year with the revenue that came in. So the total Etsy revenue I showed you was about $17,000, and the rest of the revenue that came in from private commissions, consignments, wholesale, art licensing came to be about $5,000 and in change, and some of it were paid in Venmo, which I actually didn't add in here. So about 24,000 for 2021. And not all of it is profit. The cost of doing business for me is mostly the cost of goods. That will include the cost of printing, the ink that I use at home, the printer that I have purchased, and the packaging, the mail, the mailing fee. And that for me ranged anywhere from 10 to 15%, maybe actually 20 now, given how much inflation has affected the cost of my packaging products. So take 20% from 23,000, and what you get, or what I get, is my total net profit for the year. And if you divide it by 12 months, that's a little bit between 1,000 and 2,000. And for me, it is not a huge source of income at this point, but it is money that's easy. So even though it's not a lot, I am keeping it as a source of revenue among my other 8 or 9 sources of revenue as a business. How much time is invested into the business? Currently, in the months that are not so busy, which would be from February to the end of September, I spend about an average of an hour a week to package, ship, fulfill the orders on a week-to-week basis. Now, I don't get a huge amount of order during this time. That's why I think spending a 1 hour a week will be able to handle all the fulfillment. And I've got my entire system it's stashed out a big system on a shelf with all the inventories and papers and whatnot. And I have a special, not an allocated desk to fulfill my order. So it's not a lot of time in my week, and it's not a big commitment. However, during the holiday seasons from October, November, December, and January, this is where things are going to hike up quite a bit. And during those times, I probably spend on average 2 to 3 hours a week to fulfill a higher amount of purchases. Now, in the past, I have hired help to do this for me. And when I had someone who was really diligent to do all the fulfillment for me away from my own house, I essentially didn't spend any time to fulfill this. The downside of that is you are going to need to pay someone to fulfill the order. For me, it was well worth it. Unfortunately, that person has left to do better things. So I ended up fulfilling the orders myself, and it hasn't really been a big hassle and annoyance. So I am doing it myself. But if I can find someone to take on the fulfillment aspect of the work, that will free me up from spending the 1 to 2 hours doing it myself, and can potentially be used for something else. So not a huge bother, but it is something that you can think of is when your business has scaled up to a point where fulfillment is becoming a noise and a hassle, and it's not really worth your time. Think about hiring help. Paying someone the minimum wage is going to free up your time to focus on other more important things. If you've gotten to this far in the video, now I want to give you a background of why I'm doing this, and I'll give you a little bit of context so you understand my background and my story. And next, I'm going to show you how I do this as a result of the why. So the really big why is I'm just not making enough money when I started my professional job here in San Francisco. And this is coming from 8 years of architectural school to be practicing architecture in the city as a young designer. And generally, I think if you're an architect or interior designer, you get that this profession is severely underpaid. And on top of that, living in San Francisco and the Bay Area is hella expensive. It's one of the most expensive cities in the US. Now, we do get paid a little bit more than the rest of the US in general, but I don't think that difference makes up for how expensive the city can be for a young person in their 20s or early 30s. Imagine in your early 20s and early 30s, you're just out of school, you find a job that pays, at least for me, I started with a job that paid in the lower 60,000. With the cost of housing, living expenses, you're really not going to have a lot that's left in the pocket at the end of the day. I needed to think of ideas to how I can make a little bit more money so I can actually do more things that I can afford to do as someone in their mid 20s actually, without going into debt. And that's important. I never wanted to be in debt. But the great thing about living here is that you're surrounded with by people or friends that are just so entrepreneurial. They're always drumming up ideas of things that they could be working on, of the side businesses or the side hustle that they can do. As someone who's very kind of like into this Silicon Valley vibe, and that is the culture that permeates this whole entire area where we're living. So that, I have to say, is a really, really good thing for me. So of course, I looked into my own background, my own upbringing, the skill set that I grew up with, what I was good at. And one of the things that I immediately went to was drawing, right? So I started drawing at 6 or 7 years old, and only slightly later, my parents decided to invest in my kind of this drawing upbringing much more, and they started to take me on these super long trips in China to different cities just to sit there with me to draw. And I remember sitting in these beautiful cities of historic significance, and I would draw buildings, I would draw trees, I would draw a landscape of the things that were right in front of me. And oftentimes I would sit there for 4 to 5 hours, and sometimes even a full day with my little, actually my pretty big sketchbook on a little stool, and I would just be drawing the things in front of me. So my drawing background, my architectural kind of drawing background came very, very early on. And I think that's one of the reasons why I went into architecture, because I thought architecture allowed me a opportunity to continue to draw buildings. That was very important to continue my creative juice in this way. So that was a big reason that I went into architecture. I never thought I could monetize this skill set, because even though that I drew my entire life, I never really thought that I was the best, or I never cared enough to become the best at drawing. And I think for a lot of people who grew up with an art background, that they might have a similar sentiment, right? You're good at what you do, you enjoy it, but you don't strive to be the best there is. Otherwise, I wouldn't have gone into architecture. I would have gone to become an artist. So I've had this skill set that many people praised me for and knew that I was very good at, but I never thought I was the best, and I never imagined that I could make money out of this. So I had this doubt. And because of this doubt, I never bothered to experiment making money. But this whole time that I wasn't making money, I've often been asked to make drawings for friends, and friends who has gotten a drawing from me is often very thankful, very grateful, and really love the work that I did. And at some point, I was part of an initiative where I produced drawings to raise for a charity. So my friends would pay for this charity, usually not a lot of money, and I will make a drawing for them. So this was my way to give back to the community. Still, I didn't think that I wanted to sell my art in that way. So what was the catalyst that really pushed me beyond all this and start to think about maybe I could make money doing this? And all this happened with one event, and it was an event in San Francisco called Renegade's Craft Fair. So I went to this craft fair, and I stumbled on this shop, and this shop was very known for their beautiful gold foil prints. But these prints are mostly clip art, but they did have drawings of cities, and these weren't fancy drawings. These were very simple line drawings of cities like Paris or New York, and some of them were very, very symbolic and very simplified and conceptual, and not like anything that I grew up drawing, which has a lot more detail with the shading, the amount of line work. I immediately thought, wow, these are really, really good. But I also thought to myself, I can do much better drawing if I were to be one of the artists. So that kind of seeded my mind. And the fact that I thought they could make a business out of this was incredible. And of course, I did go to their website. I have done some research and kind of projected the amount of money that they might have been making doing a year from their Etsy store and from their personal website store. So I thought if they could do it, I'm gonna try to do it similarly, but better, because I really thought my drawings were much better than theirs. So I didn't jump into this right away. Like anything I do my research at first. I looked on Etsy, I looked on other websites, and what I realized was there was a opportunity. There was a hole in this space where people weren't selling cityscapes. They weren't selling drawings of landmarks, national parks in the way where it's hand-drawn pen and felt pen produced, the kind of style that I grew up drawing. There were no one selling in this kind of style and in this capacity where they just had a print for every city. And that was really the moment that I thought I could fulfill that hole. So following that, I bought myself a laminator, and a laminator is a machine that helps you make these kind of a gold foil art prints. I bought my laminator and a few other supplies to start experimenting with making a gold foil art myself. And I ran into some trouble. It wasn't very smooth at the beginning, but what I ended up was I figured out how to make the gold foil myself at home. And that's when I started to test my drawings on Etsy. And opening an Etsy store was very, very easy. And it took like one day to open the Etsy store, set it up, and put the print on there as a way just to get it out in the world. Now I just need to wait until somebody makes a purchase. And the rest is really just a sort of a history, of more people came in and bought more. My shop grew, and I realized what I was doing attracted the market, and there was a demand for this kind of style, and people liked it. And you can see that in the review, in the comments, in the messages back to me. So I knew I had landed on something that was profitable. 4 years later, not exactly 4, I would say 3.5 years later, that's where I am today. Now my shop has more than 500 different products. Now there are not 500 different drawings. There's probably between 150 to 200 drawings right now, but many of them has variations to include the gold foil version, black and white version, and mugs, sometimes canvases, which I think I took off. So these are the variations of the different kind of drawings and the subjects that I managed to produce. Now this last section, I want to talk about the how. How do I make my art? How do I run my day-to-day? What are some tips that you can do to get your own online art store started, whether that's on Etsy or on your website? The process of figuring out how to make the gold foil involved the laminator and running the laminator with the print, and on top of that with the gold foil paper. It gets hot enough where the paper sticks to the part of the drawing, and that's how the gold foil is made. There's tons of YouTube tutorials that teaches you how this is done. So if you want to make your own gold foil art, there's a lot of resources. The supplies and the materials that I needed can all be found on Amazon or other websites, but mostly on Amazon. That's where I bought most of the things. You could try to do everything yourself, which was what I did for a long time. And then I thought maybe there is a third-party print provider that can actually do this for me, and I don't need to buy so much materials. So I did end up finding a third-party print provider that can do the gold foil reproduction for me. They can do it a lot faster in bulk, and the cost of having them do it is very well worth the time. In addition, they can do sizes that I just cannot accommodate at home. So the largest gold foil size that I can do myself at home is 8.5 by 11, but they can reproduce art as large as 24 by 36. So these would be considered as ultra big, and I actually have a size, and the cost of getting that is much more expensive than the cost of buying an 8 by 10 size gold foil. So think about the providers in your area that you can work with, and sometimes it is worth your time to not be doing this work yourself. You can also consider working with a dropshipping print provider. In short, dropshipping is a service or a company that can fulfill your order for you, and all you need to do is to send them the digital format. They can print themselves, whether they're printing it on actual paper or they are printing it on different products like mugs, canvases. They have just a gazillion different products that you can print. One of the major ones that I have worked with is called Printify, but I know there are other companies like that does exactly the same thing. The benefit of using a company like that is they take care of all the fulfillment, the inventory, the storage, so that you don't need to hold any of these things in your house yourself. Like if you just don't have the space for it, this is a really good alternative. The downside of using a dropshipping is, of course, there is somebody doing all this work for you. You have to pay them, but you're not paying it out of your own pocket. What you're paying is for a percentage of the order. And if you were to do the work for yourself, you might be paying much less to fulfill the order. But whereas if you're paying somebody else, that percentage can come at a greater rate. So there is a calculator usually on the website that tells you how much your profit will be based on how much you want to charge for the print. And you can get a sense of like where you want to be for the end of the profit at the end of the day. So that's something that you have to decide for yourself, but that is the benefit of working with a drop shipping print provider. Personally, I don't do a lot of that. I use the print provider to fulfill orders that I cannot produce at home. So for example, for me, that's like a glass mug, a canvas bag, or a canvas print that I just don't do at home. But what I do at home are all my smaller sizes, black and white prints, anything from 8.5, actually anything from 5x7 to 12x18 in black and white. I print all these myself because printing it myself, the margin is just much higher. I'm getting a margin of 80 to 90% sometimes if you're doing it at home. So I decided just to do all these on demand at home, and I don't print them in advance. Whenever someone places an order, I fulfill that order individually so that I don't need to print a bulk of them to be stored somewhere. And depending on the year and the season, I'll have different orders for different cities or different landscape and topics. So I don't really know what my top seller might be. So there's no reason just to keep that. And I'll just do my fulfillment once a week. You may know me as someone who produces a lot of art, a lot of drawings on the iPad. And I've actually done a fair amount of drawings that are produced on the iPad. Whereas before the iPad, I did a lot of the drawings that I did on real paper with real pen. And there's pros and cons. With real paper, you kind of are stuck at home at a desk where you're just drawing for however number of hours. With iPad, you can take the iPad anywhere you go, and that kind of gives you a lot more flexibility to be working more often if you can find yourself to be more productive, not just at home, but away from your office. I think the best benefit about producing original art is that the art is original. So when you scan it and reproduce it, you still have the original copy that you can sell as the original print, which I do. And I sell my original print at a much higher cost than the reproduction, the reprints from a PDF. The cons of the original art is, you're tied to a desk, and whereas the digital art, you're taking it to go. So that's the trade-off, in my opinion. But sometimes it's much easier and more convenient to be drawing on the iPad, and you can be spending more time drawing it away from your desk. Regarding to pricing structure, my pricing structure has a lot of variation on Etsy, and that's really because of the different tier pricing related to different size of paper that I am selling. Some people might like a smaller size like 5x7, others may like a 10 by or 8x10, and others may want like a bigger print. So you always want to give the customer a pricing tier so that they can choose the one that most benefit them. And this is really easy to do with art because you just find different sizes. But the variation also comes in when you make your drawing into different products like mugs and canvases and different things that you can print on. That's also another good idea to reproduce your art for other things. And that's going to be handy with search engine optimization, which I'll talk a little bit about next. Now, running the day-to-day as a business that sells mostly online and not in person, what's important to realize is that for me, in order to get to this point, it took more than 2 years to produce all the artwork that I think that I wanted to do to get it online. And then it's a matter of fulfilling the order, maintaining the store and whatnot. But you can't look at this as I'm only spending 1 hour or 2 hours for the entire time of this business. Majority of that investment in time is spent in the beginning where I'm actually producing the art. So hundreds of hours went into this part of the business. Now, if I wanted to grow my business, I could continue to produce more art, but I'm at a point where I'm actually not as interested in growing the business and I have other more important pursuit in my life. So at this point, it's more about maintaining the business and running the day-to-day. That's why for me, this is a 1 to 2 hour commitment a week. Whereas if you're drawing and you're doing other things, you're growing the business, the time that you need to market into growing this into a much bigger business, that will actually require a lot more time from you. And I'm glad this initial investment is paying off. That's how I'm able to get to here. The business is not growing and it's not dying either. It's just without more commitment and time from me to market the business, it is growing at a smaller pace. But the benefit of selling your art on a platform like Etsy is that Etsy is a service that drives traffic to your website for free. You don't need to worry about marketing and funneling traffic into your own website. Etsy does that for you. That's why they charge a fee and you pay a certain percentage of your profit, of your total revenue to Etsy. To me, that is totally worth the money, so I don't need to drive the traffic myself. Lastly, I want to give you 7 tips for starting your own online Etsy store. There's probably a lot more things to consider than just these 7 things, but just something that to keep in mind and to help you prepare if this is something that you want to be doing. Number 1 is finding a niche. Etsy is becoming more competitive nowadays. Finding the niche that no one is currently in or tapping in there to sell is going to be hard, but not impossible. There's many different artists that sell very similar things and that are making a killing for it. And it all depends on how they market their art, right? So you really have to think about what's something that you are really good at and you want to just niche down into that topic, and don't be tempted to sell things in different areas. I find that actually is detrimental to the store because when the customer lands in your store, they want to be able to identify exactly what kind of store this is. You don't want to be selling glassware, prints, clothing, and other things that are just going to muddy things up. So picking the niche is the first thing that you have to consider. Number 2 is understanding SEO. And SEO stands for search engine optimization. And I didn't do a really good job at this at first because, I just care about putting my artwork online. And there's a lot of free resource on how SEO works for Etsy, and SEO works differently for Etsy versus Google versus YouTube. Understanding SEO is really, really important because it doesn't matter how many listings you have on Etsy. If people cannot find it, or if you have a hard time searching for it, it kind of defeats the whole purpose of putting it online and using the free traffic to drive people to your place. So do your research, learn online. There's a lot of free tutorials on YouTube. For me, I invested some money in actually hiring a SEO consultant, which you can find a lot of through websites like Upwork, which I found a really great one based in the US. And she helped me understand what are some keywords that I needed in my title and tags, what are the things that will help me in search. And there's also different softwares that will help you decide what are keywords that you need to improve your searchability. So definitely don't skimp out on SEO. Number 3 is understanding and focusing on variation and quantity. In the beginning, you may not have that much artwork. For me, I had maybe about like 10 to start with, right? And producing the art is going to take time. This is why I personally think getting one artwork to be listed as multiple different products is important, because once you have that piece of artwork listed as different products, that will increase your searchability in Etsy to be seen by more people. Your keywords for the same subject matter will be different, because if you're printing it for a mug or drawing or clothing, the words that people are searching for may be different. So the more exposure that you get, the higher likelihood of someone is more likely to visit your shop and become a buyer. Now, I've also seen shops that don't have as many listings, and they've just gotten a lot of traffic through general SEO, and they just have a good product. And you can do this too, but that may take longer to get there. So my advice is actually just to focus on quantity. Number 4 is reviews, customer success. People are more likely to buy from people that have good reviews on their website. So to get good reviews, you need to have a good product, you need to have good customer service, and you could go beyond and reach out to your customers or give them something for free. So for me, in all my shipping and prints, I actually have a nice freebie that I include as part of the prints. That freebie itself can be $10, $15, but on the back of that is a coupon code and a thank you note. And when people see it as something that they weren't expecting, they're more likely to think of you, to leave you a good review, and to come back to your store and become a repeat customer. So those are the strategies that I personally use to retain customers and to have good reviews. Obviously, the more sales that you do, the more reviews you're gonna have. So your growth isn't going to be linear. Your growth is gonna be more, I wouldn't say exponential, but it is going to improve over time once your shop has more reputation, more customer success, and also Etsy will recognize your shop as an emerging shop if you spend more time in it, if you spend more time putting in new art, engaging with customer inquiries. That is going to improve your shop quality. And number 5 is consider working with a partner program for dropshipping. If you don't want to hold inventory, make things for yourself, the best thing to do is just to work with somebody who can do all those things. So you, as the artist, you just need to focus on producing the artwork itself. And to me, that is the most important part of the business, is just the ability to make beautiful things that people will like. You don't want to be bogged down into fulfillment, making the thing yourself. If you can hire help, do that instead, and your business should grow faster that way. Number 6 is don't sell on your website. And this is definitely true for my case, is I thought I could save some money by not using Etsy as a middleman that would take a chunk of my profit or eat into my profit. So I decided also just to sell the product on my website on Squarespace, where I initially bought a domain and a website, and they have e-commerce features that are very well integrated. The problem with that is now you are responsible for driving your own traffic into your own website. And for someone like myself, where I don't have a lot of followers on social media, it's very hard just to drive traffic to your website unless you're very active in marketing. You're active in promoting your art, in spreading out the word, in getting your friends and family to constantly look into your website. Otherwise, it's going to be very, very hard to market your art organically. Doesn't matter how good or beautiful your art is. If no one can find it, that's just the same as not having any art in the first place. I have very little success with putting it on my own website. Number 7 is consider selling a digital product. Now, this digital product can be the reproduction of your drawing in a scanned format. Many people may be interested into printing their own art, and they are just interested to license your work. So if you feel comfortable about licensing your own art as a JPEG or PNG format or a PDF that they can download right away as soon as they make a purchase, that takes away a lot of your time to fulfill that work. And this can be extremely streamlined. This can be a very passive business. And I'm actually seeing a lot of business owners out there that are just making a killing selling digital prints and products because they don't need to manage the day-to-day. They've decided it was better for their business just to sell it as a digital print that anyone can download, reproduce themselves, and make it bigger or smaller. The risk is your work is being sold to somebody else, and there's very little control of what you can do to limit the reproduction quantity that this person might have purchased. So for me, I decided it wasn't a risk worth making. I might change my mind in the future. I may make all my prints as digital files to download, but for now I am sticking with delivering physical prints. Let me know what you think. I am curious to see how many people are willing to make this a digital download. If you like this video, let me know how you found it helpful in the comments below. Share with a friend if you think they can benefit from my experience. I don't have this all figured out myself, but I might just be a step ahead of where you are. So if I can save you a little bit of time, inspire you a little, and help you get to where you want to be faster, wherever that is, I think I've done my job in this video.